Money doesn't just come from one place. It drips, trickles, flows, and floods into our lives in different ways. Welcome to Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood, a podcast that explores the power of multiple income streams. We've got merch. That's right. Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood t-shirts are officially here, and they're as comfy as they are conversation starting. Grab yours at the link in our show notes. Hey, Tony, how you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing good. Just hanging out. Lovely afternoon. Had a busy
Yep.
day.
Working through all your different projects.
Lots of different projects, but all fun, all good.
Good.
All right. We have a
Means-
good, fun topic today. Maybe I shouldn't say fun, but I think the result of it will be fun. There's some new research that came out from a group called Wealth Enhancement that talks about our emotions. So, like stress, anxiety, and avoidance are driving more of our financial decisions than we'd like to think. And it says that nearly half of US adults say they've avoided checking a financial account in the past year because of stress or fear. And over 60% are reporting feeling stressed about their finances.
Yeah. You sent me over two different articles, and yeah, right off the bat, the first takeaway is I was surprised at how many people are just doing the head in the sand approach as if that's gonna solve the problem. And maybe it does. Maybe it alleviates the stress or puts it further back in your mind or something. But yeah, it does go to show you that one, people are stressed about finances out there, and two, don't necessarily know how to handle that stress or solve that stress or come up with some sort of solution. And I hope that this podcast is a hope for that, right? That people are talking more about finances and learning other ways that maybe they can generate some income streams and that sort of thing. So yeah, let's dig into it. I thought one interesting is you look at it by generation. They broke up percentage of how stressed out people are. And I thought it was funny how, I guess I'd be curious to know if this graph ever changes with the percentages, right? Because the youngest people are the most stressed out and the oldest people are the least stressed out. And presumably that's because as they go through life, they get their finances stressed out or not stressed out, get figured out. Yeah, that's an interesting takeaway that so many people from 18 to 28 are so stressed out about money right now.
Yeah, very interesting. I think you bring up a good point that may always be skewed in that direction because there's just tending to be a lot of anxiety and stress when you're like a fresh college grad, for example. Of course, I think no matter what year we're in, that's going to be the case. But we are dealing with some interesting times in our country right now. And there are a lot of people out of work, and it's statistically tougher than ever for college graduates to get jobs that are allowing them to afford the cost of living plus paying back student loans. So it makes sense that there would be a lot of stress for that age group. But to your point, it is interesting that like that close your eyes and avoid approach is happening, which I think is certainly directly tied to anxiety. I was definitely one of those people many years ago of the close my eyes, don't look at my statements, don't look at my bank, don't look at my credit card. I absolutely was that person. So I completely understand where that's coming from because it's just easier to set it out of your mind and avoid it. But then the more you do it, the more anxiety it creates. So in the long run, and problems with your credit score, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh,
Yeah. And so this one, the one that's on NerdWallet, they have some potential solutions. And interesting enough, the first one for helping solve your money stress is listen to Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood.
yes.
So not really, but maybe next time they do the list.
We were joking that number one is that, number two is get a t-shirt.
Yeah, no, number two, get a t-shirt.
Actually, that was like the final tip that they gave wasn't our podcast specifically, but it was increasing your financial literacy.
Yeah.
So reading up, listening to podcasts, following reliable social channels, that kind of thing, because the more that you know, the less intimidating money is going to feel. So, absolutely, just that education piece can be so powerful. And then not just the education piece, this wasn't in the article, but it's something that we've talked about before and we'll reiterate again, is having, like, really open conversations about money and making that a habit. So, for example, I just had a girlfriend sending me voice messages today where she was feeling some anxiety around money and investing, and, like, she felt very open and comfortable to do that, and that's because we have that type of relationships. If you don't have people in your life that you're having open money conversations with, that might be something you want to shift as well, right? Start having those conversations with friends, family, your romantic partner, whomever. But the more you do it, the more it just becomes a regular everyday habit and doesn't feel as scary.
Yeah, and this ranges, it says people 18 to 28, Gen Z is 63% of them are stressed out about money, down to baby boomers 61 to 79, it's 34%. And so the average here is about 55% of the population is stressed about money, which means that if you go up to somebody and start talking to them about the stress of your money, the odds are that they're stressed about it too, and
Mhm.
maybe it's even the same things, and having that discussion, even just knowing that people are having the same stressors might help alleviate your stress. And if two heads are better than one, maybe having a discussion about it can help come up with some solutions. And so the first thing on the list, the last one was get educated. Number one on the list is keep tabs of where your money is going. So the opposite of stick your head in the sand. Just figure out what you're spending money on. Do you have subscriptions that are bleeding you dry? Do you have Are you making the minimum payment on your credit cards? Those sorts of things that can compound maybe a situation that already isn't that great. So again, just paying attention.
And you can make that. I think something that I'll hear a lot is, "That's so difficult, that's so hard for me to look at it," or sometimes it's so boring
Yeah.
to do that. And so, I I think, and we may have talked about this on a past episode as well, but, like, putting a date in your calendar, so it's the same thing as going to the gym, right? If you're somebody who is, "I'm not gonna go to the gym unless I'm signed up for a workout class or signed up with a personal trainer or scheduled it in my calendar." If it's not scheduled, it's not real. So, like, actually block time in your calendar, even just once a month, to have a money date with yourself, or you can do that with your partner, your spouse, or do it with friends. Throw a little brunch party, sit around and have delicious snacks, and everybody sits on their laptop and goes through their statements and looks at all their spending and tracks everything, and you can really make it, like, almost gamify it in a way. Can you eradicate one expense that month and just and make it a game for yourself?
Well, that's the thing. And I don't think it has to be this overwhelming drinking from a fire hose type thing. Just pick one thing and check it off the list and do the 1% infinity approach where it's just 1% at a time and you just keep doing that as opposed to, yeah, it is overwhelming if you say, all right, I'm going to analyze my entire financial world and I'm going to go through all of my expenses. I'm going to balance my checkbook that I haven't balanced in 10 years or whatever. Yeah, that's overwhelming. You'll probably never do it. But if you just say, yeah, I probably clicked on these subscriptions that I haven't used in months. Maybe I'll just start knocking one of those off. Or that gym membership that I haven't been using. Maybe I don't actually need that. Or whatever it is. Maybe I should just call and find out really where am I at with this debt situation or whatever. There's a lot of small steps that can go a long ways.
That's a great point because it can be very common to just have that big picture thinking around this, where it's like, I have, for example, $20,000, not me, just in general, $20,000 in debt. And I need to pay off that debt, and that's what starts to swirl in people's heads. So then all they're thinking about is the $20,000 they need to pay off instead of looking at the little steps of how that can get done. So, like, to your point, maybe it's one phone call they make to lower an interest rate. Maybe it's one subscription they cancel. So it's like getting really granular can be the way that you can accomplish that really big visionary goal that you have versus just always sitting down and going, "I have to deal with this 20K of debt."
And it can be that desk by 1,000 cuts thing. And I don't care if you're 18 and making a minimum wage, or if you're in your 70s and retired. We all have money that just is probably going out or that we're just not paying attention to. And so it's costing a lot. And generally, those may seem small, but I think they can get magnified. One, if your income's low, and a $20 a month thing might be a big deal. If you're in your 70s or whatever, maybe a $20 a month subscription wouldn't be that big of a deal, but you've built up all these other things. Maybe it's property taxes that you're overpaying on, your valuation's off, or you're paying, maybe your accountant is really expensive, or maybe the fees in your brokerage account are too high. There's just all these different things. And so I think everybody can take a look at their picture and improve it. I know I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And the article flows in a bit of a similar direction where it's basically saying, first, let's reduce your fears and anxieties by just tracking, and then using this approach, this granular approach that we're talking about. And then once you have a better grasp and you're not fearing this entire process, then you can start the planning phase, which can also be an iterative approach. It doesn't have to be that, like you were saying, this giant thing. It can still be that small cuts, but just sitting down and starting to think about, what is my financial plan? Like, how can I bolster my emergency fund if that's a piece of it? So starting to look at the planning phase.
Yeah. And in this article, they have start or increase your emergency fund as number 3, and then reduce your debt as number 4. Personally, would maybe switch those. I
Yeah.
think it depends on your situation and what kind of debt and all of those pieces. But what really drives me crazy, and I have debated financial advisors about this, is when people have a $10,000 in their emergency fund and they have $3,000 in credit card debt that they're not paying off, and they're paying 20% interest on that money. I wouldn't necessarily just follow this numbering system blindly. Make it work for whatever your situation is. And not that having an emergency fund and some savings is bad, but if you're getting 2% on that money and you're paying out 20%, you might still be heading in the wrong direction. So yeah, so then they have reduced debt, and then explore your property ladder. And this is basically talking about getting into home ownership, because according to their study, people that are homeowners are less stressed about money. Now, there's a few factors to that. One, they're probably older, and we've already seen that the younger people are more stressed out. If you are financially stable enough to buy a house, then maybe you're less stressed about it. But I think the big thing with that, though, is also just stability and known costs. If you know your lease is coming up in 3 months and you don't know whether rents are going to go up or you're going to have to move or whatever, that's a bigger stressor than if you own a house and your taxes and insurance might go up, but your mortgage most likely is staying the same unless you're in a variable rate.
Yeah. And it would obviously depend on what they're buying. Is it a fixer upper that could potentially bleed out a lot of money? Or is it in an area that's going to have hurricanes and suddenly your insurance is wildly expensive? There are so many things. But like you said, I think it is circumstantial for the home piece of it. So everybody's going to have to make their own decision of whether that does reduce anxiety, or is it not? Is it better for them to rent right now? Does that reduce their anxiety? Probably just an individual decision.
And that is interesting. I don't know if this will change. I know that a lot of baby boomers are choosing to rent, and we've talked about that in the rent versus own episode. So these numbers may skew a little bit, or may evolve a little bit over time, where maybe renting is that more stable piece, especially if you could get into a longer term lease and know that you're not going to have to, fix a hot water heater or furnace or something.
A mailbox.
Yeah, a mailbox.
We had a mailbox incident.
Yeah, I don't know. We probably have to get permission to share that picture. I didn't get permission for the T-shirt picture of my dad and Gary in their T-shirts. Gary's Melissa's husband, if you haven't listened to previous episode. But I did get a great picture of Gary reinforcing the structure on a failed post from Roblox.
You never know.
Yeah, it's a good one. I told you I got it. My background is just a scrolling a slideshow of pictures, and that one's going on there.
It is a good one. Any other tips that you have, Tony, around this easing of financial anxiety? Anything you can think of outside of what the article shared?
I think we talk about different income streams a lot on this podcast, and that's the whole basis behind it. In addition to just talking about finances, that to me, for me, that's one of my biggest stress relievers when it comes to money is that I have created and continue to create a lot of different income streams. So if you have one income stream and you're worried about that one income stream going away, that's a big deal. If you have
Yeah.
multiple income streams, one going away could be very impactful, but at least you know that maybe you do still have some income coming in, whether that is allowing you to save while you have these multiple income streams. So for a rainy day, or if that's just allows you to limp along with maybe even it's one of your smaller income streams before you can bolster it up again. Or maybe it puts you in a position where maybe you have a 9 to 5 job and that's your main income and you've got a side hustle going on that's helping and you lose that 9 to 5 job for whatever reason. Maybe that side hustle is now your path forward and maybe you can add some fuel to the fire in the way of time and that can be it. So I just think having those different income streams and having that diversification, it alleviates my stress around money a lot.
I agree with you. It does feel like a lot less fear, a lot less anxiety when you have more control. I feel the drip, trickle, flow, flood is like really putting the control in our hands. We're very conscious, very intentional with making financial decisions within that framework. And you just know that there's like money flooding coming in, maybe not flooding, but coming in various ways. So, like you said, if something was at once a flow and now is a drip, or maybe just is gone altogether, just dried up altogether, you know that there are other streams coming down the pipe. So I think it's beautiful for that reason. And I also think for me personally, it shifts my mindset a bit from feeling like I'm reliant on a job, a client, like just something singular and individual where there's always going to be some simmering anxiety. That particular opportunity might disappear within the drip, trickle, flow, flood framework. I never feel that way because I always feel like I can have another stream. There's always another client to get. There's always another way to make income. So it feels very empowering versus like this thing in the back of my head always feeling like that's going to disappear.
Yeah, I think that's just a great way to think about the model. So I hope that by just listening to this and one understanding that there's a lot of people out there with anxiety about money and having those discussions and thinking about it and being proactive. I hope that the next time NerdWallet does this graph, that the average goes down because everybody's been listening to you and I and our guest talk.
That's right. So, with that said, thank you everybody for listening today. Tell everybody you know about Drip Trickle Flow Flood. Email NerdWallet and tell them, just kidding. But thank you so much for listening. And one thing that you can do that is super helpful for us is if you can rate and review our podcast on your favorite platform. That just helps more people to find out and discover our podcast. And with that said, we'll see you next time on Drip Trickle Flow Flood. Thanks, everybody.